Welcome to Module 5 and this exciting example about fish. My favorite. Okay, so we're going to go into this table and we're going to talk about it. Let's start at the beginning. In this module, we have 3 sessions, so there'll be 3 different videos. The first, we're going to look at structured ranges, rows and columns, etc. Next, we're going to session 5.2, we're going to look at filtering data. And in 5.3, we're going to talk about pivot tables, which are incredibly powerful tables and help us do analysis super quick and saves us a lot of steps. So highly recommended. Let's start on page 258. We'll look at what a table looks like. So eventually our table is going to look like this one on page 258, 259. And we're going to make a table that we can sort, we can go through them, and basically each column is going to have one kind of data. Let's look at our example. We have customer ID, which I used flash fill using the customer's first name and the end of their phone number to put together. With the kind of fish that they purchase, their name, phone number, store location. We have 3 different stores in this example. How they paid, their purchase amount, and how much they purchased in the total previous year. Okay, so this is basically like this year's purchases versus last year's purchases, and the table goes down, pretty far down here. Okay, so we're going to run through this example, and we're going to try to put this into a table and figure it out. So as we talked about, take a look at page 260 and figure 5.1. And as we discussed in class, or you've seen in another video, it's really important to understand where your range is, because if we go down here and we start putting other things in there, and we're trying to do an analysis, it's going to interrupt it. So we should either put our variables onto another sheet, or we could put them off to the side. But basically, our table needs to have these different columns all the way from the top to the bottom, and these references are going to be down. So if we put, let's say, like an exchange rate down here, and then we continue going, it's going to overwrite it. It's going to have 2 pieces of data in the same cell. Not very good. So you could do that by planning. You can see on page 261 to put in a table and figure out what information goes where. These are our fields, so we know what that's already going to look like. And now here's the problem. So I'm typing in customers. I put in the customer type of fish. I put in their name, their phone number, and this is my little database, right? Now I get down here and I forget what the header said, right? So we want to make sure that we could always see this row up here, the row number 1. So even if we're down here, it still shows up at the top, right? And we could do that by freezing the row. Okay, so to freeze the row, I'll click on where it says View, and I'll go to where it says Freeze Panes. Now it says, do you want to freeze a particular spot, or do I want to freeze the top or the first column? So in this case, I'm going to freeze the top row. All right, so now you'll notice that as I scroll down, the top row always stays showing, and even if I'm way down at the bottom, I could still see what our legend is, and I could still see what it is. Now, I can go above and below. I could also freeze it side to side. Often, we have the person's first name here on the left, and then as we scroll down, entering tons of information, eventually that person's name gets lost, and I don't know whose record I'm putting in. That way, let's say I have months across the top and day and users across the side, I'm able to scroll to the side by freezing the first column, okay? And right now I have freezing the top row. I can also choose to freeze both depending on a particular spot that I want to be frozen. Okay, so now we could use our data like this, and I could do things like go down here, use a tool that we already know, like let's say AutoSum, and I'll check that's our whole range, say okay, add that all together. Like, we know how to do things like this that we've learned in previous modules, and it would be possible for us to, use different tools that we have to manipulate the data right here on the sheet. But what we want to do is turn it into a table so it has all these other features like we could see on page 258 at the beginning of the chapter, right? So to do that, what I'm going to do is click up here at the top, select everything, or I could just manually go and select the cells that I want. Okay, but for our purposes, I'm going to select the entire worksheet. And I'm going to go Insert and then Table. Okay, it's going to say, where is your table data? I'm going to put in the range, which is already selected because my thing was selected. And it says my table has headers. Now you'll notice that the range that I have is basically the entire table. It's everything, and I can continue working out in the future. It will continue adding to it. I could make a table only a few lines if that's what I was interested in. I press OK. It says this operation your form has a large number of cells, and that's because I selected everything. So let's try and see what happens. Okay, spoiler alert, it crashed my computer. So I'll reboot this and we'll come back and we'll try it again with maybe a smaller table selection. All right, so it actually did work at the end, and let's take a look at, so if I scroll, you'll see that it actually formatted 16,000 columns going that way and 1 million rows going the other way. So probably not what we wanted, but regardless, this is our table. I'm just going to bring it back so it works a lot quicker. And of course, pressing undo crashed the computer again. So we'll wait a few minutes, we'll go back to the beginning, and I'm going to try to put a table just around the cells that we want. All right, so we're back. Now let's try this again. We'll grab only the cells that we want. I'll make it a little bit bigger this time, and go Insert Table. It's going to say, what's our table range? This time it's a lot smaller. I'll press OK, and it converted everything into a table. Okay, so let's look through a couple of the features. Right away, you'll notice as soon as we make the table, it sets us up with all our headers here, and it will color code it. And first, we have table style. So right now we're on the blue, but we could expand that and pick a whole bunch of other ones depending on what we're trying to make it look like. Right? So for now, we'll stick with this light blue option. Sure. I don't know. Now there's too many options I can't pick. Okay, we also talked about, this is under Table Tools Design. And we also talked about putting in, we could put in a total row, right, which would add a total down at the bottom. Do we want to have banded rows, like, every other one switches color or not? And so on. Okay, so that's what we got so far. Now, at the top, you see these little drop-down boxes. They're called header rows, and we have them instead of column headings, right? And we're going to look at a few ways to play around with those in just a second. Okay, so you can see some of the things that you could do with tables, like renaming, modifying it, adding and deleting rows, through the next examples, bringing us to page 270. I just want to show you where the dialog box is. If you click on the table, in this case, I'll go down to the last row. I'll click on line 32. And I'm going to go where it says remove duplicates. And it's going to say, which do you want to look for duplicates for? I press OK. It will look through the table and it will sound 7 duplicate found and removed, 31 values unique remain. Okay, so we'll go through the table and we'll take out duplicated values. Okay, so that's where that is. Now, let's look at sorting data. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is, I have all this information. Now, of course, every row going this way is one customer, right? So this is Jedediah Smith. This is his username, his fish, etc. And everything's along this row. But let's say I want to find out who purchased the most this year and who purchased the most last year. Okay, now, if I sort just this column, what's going to happen? It's going to get unsynced with all the other data, because no matter what this column gets resized to, I always want the 6686 to be associated with the rest of the stuff on this line, because it's not going to help me to have the biggest number on top if it's not connected with the guy's name and phone number, right? So what we could do is click on the row that we want to sort, click on data, and press where it says sort. Okay, this dialog box comes up and it's going to say, how do we want to sort, right? Do we want to sort by in this case, we're going to go with purchase amount, which is this year's sales. What do we want to sort by? Do we want to sort by cell color? Now, if you remember, we talked about this earlier with conditional formatting. So let's say I set up to automatically apply red, yellow, and green coloring to a cell matching my criteria. I could have it sort based on that criteria, like all the reds at the top, all the yellows in the middle, all the greens at the bottom, for example. Also font and cell icons, but in our case, we're going to go with values, which is the number. And I want it to be largest to smallest, so the biggest number on top. I press OK, and it's going to sort this line to be at the top. But if we go down and we look for our 6686, you'll notice it's still associated with Jedediah Smith, who's on the same line, right? Except now that there's a few other people who are above him, so their lines got moved up instead, right? You'll notice that this little icon here got changed to sort, right? We could also use the sort function by just clicking in that column and pressing where it says sort largest to smallest or sort smallest to largest, depending, right? So let's give that a try. This has now the smallest number at the top versus having the largest number at the top. But if we really want to control the options of what we're sorting by, we could put in a line like this. And we could do multiple things. So for example, let's say I'm looking at my list here, and I'm like, okay, so Jaron Hines bought $2,000 this year and $26.69 last year. Now, Ryan Timothy, he bought $522 this year, but $1,311 last year. Is this really the order, because I'm only going by purchase amounts, is this really the most out of both years? I want to know who's my overall total. Now, of course, I could figure that out by doing something like equals sum, putting in a 2-year total for this, and then hitting enter, and then that would show me the overall number. I could sort by that, but let's try to keep it even simpler, right? I could go and click on the column and press sort, and I could say, okay, so I want to purchase amount, which is this year's purchase amount, values largest to smallest. Then I'm going to add a level, and I'm going to say then do purchase year, values largest to smallest. Okay, so what's this going to show me? The biggest purchaser last year and the biggest purchaser this year together. Or I could look at who's made the most gains. Largest purchaser this year versus smallest last year. So whoever has the biggest this year plus the smallest last year would be added together, showing me the difference between them, right? But in this case, I'm going to do largest to smallest for both. I'll hit OK. Okay, and now it's going to resort, and it's going to show me in order who has the largest this year. This year's purchases aren't very big generally, right, compared to last year, but it reorganizes them according to both criteria. So if we press sort, we'll see both of those happening, both of those levels. So it first sorts by this, and then it sorts by that. We can also do the same thing with other kinds of data. So I'll press sort by. Let's pick customer name. Values. It's the value that's in the cell, and we'll go A to Z. So we want it to be alphabetical. Then I say, let's do alphabetical and by store location, also alphabetical. So I press OK. Now you'll notice that first it goes through and sorts it by alphabetical, right? So Xavier Thompson is at the bottom, Ashley Eubanks is at the top. But now you'll notice that Fredericton, Sussex, it doesn't look like it's sorted. But what it does is that let's just look at the J's here, okay? So just for the people who start with a J, it will sort them alphabetically within their group. Although it doesn't look like it worked very well. Let's try again. Store location, values, A to Z. Not sure. Did it work? All right, let's give this another try. I think it's because it's sorting first by the first part of the name alphabetically and then going on. So we'd have to look more into that. But I just wanted to look at some other options. So let's try add level. Let's press, let's do purchase, payment method, sort A to Z. Press OK. All the people with cash are at the top, debit and credit, right? Sorry, cash, credit, and debit. Get sorted like that, okay? Then we could also go and press options, and we could say, is it top case sensitive? Are we looking from top to bottom to top, and so on. We could also copy this level and then change and refine it depending on what we need. So there are a lot of options in terms of using the sorting button in order to manipulate our table. Okay, so that's going to bring us to page 275. And you could play around with the custom list dialog box. If you wanted to sort by a pattern that it doesn't currently know, let's say your week starts on Tuesday, it's going to try sorting dates by Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, because it thinks that's the way the normal pattern is. So if you want to have a different approach or a different list for it to sort by, you can create one using the custom list dialog box, as you can see in figure 514 on page 275. And next, we're going to jump into filtering in the next video in session 5.2.